Computer. Okay, so we're going to get started on that. And then what I'm going to do is ask Sarah and Alicia to introduce themselves and eventually introduce Alyssa as part of the work that they do. And sort of our big question tonight, I know we've had different presentations for this group over the months, mostly related to curriculum and that sort of thing. And tonight we're going to take a little bit of a different spin. And the big question for us is, hi, Michael, we're going to ask you to be on mute, and we're just getting started here. And we're on recording here. Alicia and Sarah are going to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves, and why is this issue so critical for us, especially those of us who are working with students in one capacity or another. So why don't we take it away? And I'm going to put myself on mute.
Alicia, do you want to start?
Sure. Nice to meet you. My name is Alicia Christensen. I work for the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And I support a large nationwide network called the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, or CLEAN. And this is a network that provides resources such as curriculum and data visualizations and videos that are standards aligned and basically available for educators to use in the classroom as they talk about climate change. We recently rolled out some pages that are meant to kind of help provide some resources for educators around supporting their youth with climate mental health. And I'll talk a little bit more about those later, but as that's a little bit about me. My background is in informal education. I spent some time down in Florida working in the Keys. I worked for the Newfound Harbor Marine Institute down there, taking kids out of boats and getting them out in the ocean and the coral reefs. My grandma also lived down there. So I spent every summer down there in Florida. It's a beautiful state. Sarah.
Thanks. My name's Sarah Newman. I'm the director of the Climate Mental Health Network, and we partner with Alicia and her colleagues at CIRRUS. I started this organization almost 3 years ago, born out of my own struggles with climate emotions and looking for resources. And since then, we've now have a strategy and an organization that's very youth focused, and we're doing a lot of K through 12 work, as well as work with parents and Gen Zers themselves. And one of the key people who is leading our education work is here tonight, and that is Elisa. So let her introduce herself. And thank you, Scott, again, for just creating the space for us to be here. Huge thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elisa Teles Munoz, and I'll be talking a little bit more about my personal experience. I'll leave that for later. But I consult for the Climate Mental Health Network and also the National Wildlife Federation in a project in New York, and I'll discuss that a little bit. And my consulting company is called Earth Minds Consulting. So I'll share a little bit about my experiences being a young person in this space and what motivated me, and the things I hear from the young people that I work with. But I'll also add, my parents live in Florida. I didn't grow up there, but they've lived there for the last 5 years or so, 6 years, I guess. And I have a lot of thoughts about how things are going with respect to climate change and climate education more broadly. So I'm really happy to be plugged into this network of educators in Florida.
Scott, would you like to show the film now? Would you like me to cue it up? Oh, you're muted.
Sure, I'm going to go ahead and cue up the film. We're going to get started with that, right? And
yeah.
I'm going to put put the recording on pause, given our issues with copyright. All right, I think, Sarah, did you want to take it from here, or I could just foreground a little bit, because I read, I did a little background research on, and I know the APA had a study from 2019. They were talking that, just a few facts that said 2/3 of adults had some anxiety about climate change. And then you start talking to younger generations, 84% of 16 to 25-year-olds had at least moderate worries about it. And then almost half of that group had said it impacted their daily lives in a negative way. So the problem is certainly widespread and surprising. That's maybe a surprising thing to a lot of people. So I'm glad we're talking about this tonight.
Yeah, and thank you, Scott. And I'll just quickly share that film was made almost 2 years ago, which is pretty amazing, as part of a workshop that we did, and then we edited it and have taken the show on the road, and it's been shown around the world at film festivals and schools and community groups, and it's been seen by well over 100,000 people. Alicia hosted a screening, for example. So it's really been very well received. It's available in 5 languages. So I can answer more questions about it in the Q&A, but I wanted just to turn it over briefly to Elisa, who is a Gen Zer. So this is very much her lived experience, and she's also working in education. So she has just a little bit to share with everyone.
Yeah. So thank you guys. I love that film, and I've shown it to my students who I'll talk about, and I've shown it to the network that I lead. So I'm 23 years old, and I went to American University in Washington, D.C. And when I was a freshman, so I was about 18 years old, I didn't care about climate change at all. It wasn't something I was interested in. And I was very anthropocentric in my thinking. Sorry, am I lagging? Can you all hear me? Yeah, it's fine. Okay. I was very anthropocentric in my thinking about climate change. And I took a course on environmental ethics in college, just by pure coincidence. Didn't have anything to do with my major. And it changed the course of my life and my career. And I didn't learn about climate change in school very much, just the basics, greenhouse gases and whatnot. I went to high school in Connecticut, and I was shocked at how much what I felt like was being concealed from me in school. And so taking that course, I had the privilege to take that course because I was continuing my education at the university level. And I majored in international relations and shifted it to, sustainability and development focused major. And so I was really anxious about it. And I was like, how dare my teachers, how dare the systems never educate me about this? And I felt like the central question of that class was, if we know about the reality of what's happening, do we have a moral imperative to do something about it? And my answer was yes. And that means that this needs to be. I think there was somebody in the movie who was saying, it takes over all my thoughts and everything I do is oriented around that. I totally agree. It's even down to like the tiny decisions. And so my parents moved to Florida while I was in college, and the culture shock that I had from living in the North versus the South effectively. I mean, Florida's a little different, but South Florida especially was shocking. Sustainability was not at the top of mind in anybody that I knew. Even something as small as using reusable bags at the grocery store, like the security guard was like, "Why do you do that?" Like, they were just triggered by it, and they didn't understand that concept. And so yeah, it's very personal to me. So I kind of landed in education. Wasn't what I was planning to do. I wanted to deal with infrastructure. And so one of my, the people I work with was like, well, education is infrastructure. And so education is what I ended up doing. And I really do believe in the power of it now. I realized my own story and my own lived experience is an example that students shouldn't have to deal with. They shouldn't need to wait until they're 18 years old. Students are really malleable and should be learning compassion for each other and for non-living beings at a much earlier age than 18 years old. And so I'll just share this slide to show you who it is that I work with. So I work, one of the organizations that I consult for is the National Wildlife Federation, and the project is called the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force. And so among many things that I do for them, I facilitate youth steering committee meetings. And so I started doing this when I was in college. I was 21 years old when I started doing this. I was a kid myself, I still am. And I feel like I've grown up with a lot of these kids. Some of them were freshmen when they started, and now I'm writing their college recommendations. So it's been pretty beautiful to see that progress. These are only a few of them. There's like 35 of them right now. And so the model is basically, these are youth-led meetings, meaning me, but also the youth themselves, because they have an e-board and they meet without me and they determine what it is that they want to do. And we meet once a week. The e-board meets more than that. So they're really, really interested in this. And so the model is giving students the tools to express their climate emotions and also their desire for education that actually serves them. Because in New York, they have this standardized test called the Regents exam. And basically, it's an additional test that's tied to graduation requirements. And so much of what the teachers need to teach about is tied to Regents exams. And the students are saying, like, this is meaningless. This is information that teachers just need to check these boxes, but this is like the crisis of our lifetime. And so they come to us after school to ruminate over these complex issues together. Actually, on Thursday, we'll be talking about individual versus collective action as a sort of debate. We talk about things like the polarization of climate change in the US. We talk about systems thinking, and the level at which students today talk about these things. I'm not much older than some of them. I'm 5 years older than some of them. But the level at which they talk about these concepts is so much higher than when I was their age. Because ultimately, what it always comes down to is kids are learning about climate change. Even if whatever the school system of whatever state tries to do to eliminate this kind of education in school, you cannot hide the fact of what's happening because they're seeing it in their real everyday lives, especially in a state like Florida, where there's sea level rise, there's sunny day flooding in inland parts of Florida because of the poor infrastructure, not to mention, obviously, tropical storms, etc. They're witnessing it in their real lives, they're witnessing it in the news, and they're witnessing it on social media. And so as a result, they're exposed to these concepts. Even if they're exposed to 1 minute clips of these concepts on social media, they know what environmental justice is. They know the linkages between the capitalist system and what's happening to our planet today. And it's our duty to supplement that education in the place that they spend the most time in their lives, which is school. And we need to give parents the resources to be able to talk about this at home as well, and teachers the resources to be able to talk about this in school in a healthy, solutions-based, and honest way. I think that from the students that I work with and myself, students hate being told you are the future. That's a burden that they did not sign up for, and they feel it's really unfair, and they feel like it's a displacement of environmental harm. And they don't like that responsibility. They like being told what are the options. They like to be told, honestly, I don't know what the answer is, but let's work and figure it out together. That would be so much more meaningful than lying and pretending like we know what to do, because we don't. This is uncharted territory. So I think young people also experience a lot of hardship when it comes to older generations. And so I think that there needs to be intergenerational conversations that are not defensive, and to allow, people of different generations to communicate their concerns in a way that's not finger pointing, like you caused this, or you're not doing enough, or you need to step up. We need to level the playing field so that we can all work together rather than, appropriate responsibility to others. So that's just a little bit about, what I do, why I do it, how the people I work with and work alongside feel about it. I think active hope with Joanna Macy talks about this, and so does Tom Roderick in his book, Teach for Climate Justice, is a really important way to get young people to think about this, because it's like, it's not just hope as a passive, as a concept, it's a verb, and you need to imagine the future that you want and actually do something to achieve it rather than, relinquishing my individual action. You can't say like, this is a systemic problem and they need to fix it. No, like we are all part of the system as well. And so I think students feel really empowered by that message. So yeah, with that, I'll pass it to Alicia to talk about the CLEAN network, which is phenomenal, and students and teachers really enjoy it.
Thank you. That was wonderful to hear from you. And it's going to be hard to follow what you just said, I think. Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, I represent a national network that provides educators resources in being able to teach about climate and energy topics in their classrooms. And we've been around for about a decade, a little over a decade. And we were hearing from a lot of educators about how to address their students' climate emotions, and just not having the tools, not having the resources to be able to address that. And what we are kind of is a big clearinghouse of resources that others out there have created. So we have a big database of curriculum and curriculum and videos and data visualizations that have been peer reviewed by other educators and also scientists to check for kind of best practices in education, and also that they're scientifically accurate. And kind of what we realized is we needed to be able to try to connect the educators that use our network with resources that could help support kind of the whole person, outside of just the science pieces, but how to help address these various different emotions that are coming up that Elisa talked about. And so let me share my screen here, and I'll show you a little bit. The dog's quiet the whole time, then as soon as I start talking, he starts going. So this is the CLEAN, which is just cleannet.org. You can get to it. And we have a link here on the homepage to our climate mental health activities. Actually, this is, our activity guide. So we developed kind of some different short activities that educators could use in partnership with the Climate Mental Health Network. And this is actually their climate emotions wheel that they developed. And so these lesson plans include just basically very brief instructional practices to utilize the climate emotions wheel in the classroom. They are all aligned to the CASEL core competencies, the social emotional network, and kind of have the learning objectives outlined and the amount of time that they should take, and the ages that they are geared towards. So that's one resource that we have on that page. And then another resource that you'll find, let's see, wait, just a second. Oh. Okay. Another resource you'll find are these climate mental health pages. And we've kind of broken them into a bunch of different strategies based on what we found existed out there in terms of resources that were able to be easily used by educators. And so each of these strategies has teaching resources that are connected to them that can be used, by educators in the classroom. And a lot of these resources here are things that we did not create. So the activities I went over briefly before we did create, but a lot of what's on our site has been created by a lot of different organizations out there that have been doing various different types of work around climate mental health. And so this is just a resource, something that is available for anyone to use. Everything's free on our website. You don't have to sign up for anything to get access to these resources. And the main page for the climate mental health strategies kind of goes over the main strategies that we've found through all of those resources seem to exist out there for really addressing climate emotions with youth. So if you have a chance, I encourage you to go into the site and explore it. I'll put the direct website link to this page in the chat as well.
Scott, would you like us to go into a Q&A now?
Sure, this might be a good time, and that sounds like a great lead in for that kind of thing. So why don't we do that? Because since there's so few of us, I guess if someone wants to raise their hand, maybe either physically or they can do it, just unmute themselves maybe, and we'll do it that way. Michael's got a question.
Yes, thank you very much for putting this on. And the speakers are all wonderful. I'm just worried about the politics of all this because I'm in Broward County and the schools have been banning books. I asked one of the school board persons, is science still being taught, and are there science clubs? And if there are science clubs, are they allowed to talk about climate change? As you may see, my virtual background, I'm trying to get young people to help me and others. I'm a precinct captain, and I'm working within the system to, even though I don't believe everything that the Democrats are employed with, but I am fighting within the Broward Democratic Party. 4 years ago, there was no platform for the Broward Democratic Party. So I started fighting 4 years ago. And this year, we're putting together a platform. And I did the environmental one. And I'm promoting the Green New Deal. And it's going to be on the Broward County Democratic platform. And the real reason I wanted to do this is to encourage young people to try to break. I used to be a Bernie person, and I still am. But unfortunately, we lost the last election to Hillary because many of progressive people like myself didn't go and try to get within the system. So I became a precinct captain. I'm fighting within the system to get progressive change and even talk about climate change. And Florida is ridiculous that they don't allow you to do that. One of the people I know is a history teacher, and he's talking about the Civil War, and he says, I don't care. I'm going to get fired, but I'm going to talk about slavery. So Florida is messed up, but we have to fight within the system. But if you don't get people elected, like you, young lady, Alyssa, it's not going to happen. So I hope you change and consider becoming a precinct captain. And there's very few workers. There's a lot of people that.
Oh, Michael, I think did I freeze? I'm losing everybody. Huh? Yikes.
And that's it.
Mike,
Thank you.
oh, sorry. I froze for a second, but let me just build a little bit from what I heard Michael asking. We're running into a lot of resistance, obviously, in Florida on education and a
Scott,
lot of things. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just saying I mentor a 7th grader in Broward Public Schools, and she does have this as part of her curriculum. I mean, we do homework together, and it is part of the 7th grade biosciences curriculum. So don't lose hope altogether. I mean, it's not a huge part, but they did spend a couple of days on it. So just so you know that.
Alyssa, you had some comments or a question?
Yeah, I one of the things, well, I don't work with youth in Florida, but I think this is probably across the board. I think that young people are so frustrated by the political landscape today that they have many different reactions to it. Some students used to be very politically active and then feel burnt out from caring, if you will. And then other students feel that it's not serving them, and other students simply don't know or perhaps aren't interested. And so I think that the landscape of what's happened in the last 10 years or so have been it's been very difficult for students. I will say that I think young people especially don't feel represented by, like young students who are progressive don't feel represented by the Democratic Party. And that's, I don't know how, I'm not like expressing my views on it. It's just what I hear from the students where they're like, these are not the choices that I want. And so they don't see allies at the federal level. The state level is a different story. And I agree. I think urging students to vote is important. On the point that Stephanie was saying about like it's in the curriculum, and I think that if you take a look at the NGSS standards, for example, there are inroads for educators to teach about climate change. They use the term one time in middle school and I think one time in high school for NGSS, and that's not even mentioning social studies. And I think that it is very much on the individual teacher, unfortunately, to find those inroads, and the administration of their specific school can crack down on them, which is not the system that we need right now. There is definitely a war on education in Florida and other states in the nation. And so when you're talking about wanting to expand access to climate education, I think people put it in a package of other education reforms and, don't give the issue a chance, really.
Okay. We have some
Michael.
additional questions. I heard somebody trying to unmute there.
I was going to say, we have a program that we run in rural Colorado. And we, the program is very much about climate change, but we have tried to be careful with using that term specifically. so as to hopefully still get students knowledgeable kind of about the impacts that are happening on their communities without referring, using that big word, that big kind of sometimes scary word for some people, climate change. And we've had some success there. We engage students with looking at the direct impacts of basically flood, drought, or wildfire in these rural communities that are more conservative. And these students, end up creating these projects to make their communities more resilient against these natural hazards, which inevitably is helping to make their communities more resilient against climate change. But it seems to be swallowed a little bit easier, I guess, in these communities when we're not using that big scary word, climate change. That's one thought, but it's a tricky. I think what you're talking about is very tricky and unfortunate. And I think, like Elisa says, kids are hearing about this outside of school everywhere. And if we don't address it in the classroom, then I think it's unfortunate for the students.
Related to that, when you were showing the resources, I was kind of wondering, do the teachers, when you show this to teachers, are they saying, well, I will wait till I have some negative feedback from students before I introduce some things? Or are they being, some student actually does express some concerns or, anguish about what they're seeing and then doing it? Or are they being sort of saying, okay, well, I know I've heard that, there's a great deal of concern about this among young people. I'm going to kind of go with that and just sort of introduce these things before I even hear any feedback from students, because maybe they're reluctant, or maybe that's part of other issues that they're having.
Sure.
How do you do it?
That's a great question. And we had a bunch of teachers test these activities out in the classroom, in their classrooms, in various different states. And I think, they had varying different levels of, awareness of where their students were at, kind of with their emotions. And several of them had said, that they were a little bit anxious to start talking about emotions in class, especially in like a science class, right? But when they did, they were really surprised about how many students wanted to talk about how they were feeling about what's going on with climate change. And that, what they thought was going to be a short conversation turned into an hour-long class period, where students really wanted to talk about, like just how they feel about what's happening with climate change, their anxiety, their anger, their frustration. I think, it's wonderful, Lisa, that you're working with, youth, I think, to provide a space for them just to talk and feel like they're listened to and find solidarity, amongst their friends. So we kind of encourage, I guess, that the activity guide is broken out. And so it starts with people just kind of thinking about and identifying their emotions. And they may be all sorts of different places on that wheel. They're not all worry, concern, anger. There's, also some hope and positivity around that too. There's also apathy, and I think it's important to be open to all of those emotions, that all of those emotions exist and they're all okay and they're all normal.
I wonder, Jamie, I don't have you on my view screen on the top. I'm going to click over there, but I'm wondering if any of your students you find your students expressing these kinds of range of emotions that she was talking about, or how does that come up in your classroom?
Well, so I'm actually currently not a teacher, but I do have a master's degree in environmental education 20 years ago, and back then we were not learning about this. So this is all very interesting to me and enlightening, and I feel the sense of emergency in the last few years because of my own child. She doesn't find that there is any space to talk about it. At home, we talk about it, but at school, not so much. So yeah, that has been my experience. And I wanted to share one thing that I work at the NYU School of Law. So there are several professors and centers. They actually, at a global level, they try to secure grants money, and there's a lot of effort going into working on these issues, including supporting youth advocates. So I think that is really important. And once again, I think tonight, just like, I'm just new here, and hearing from all of you has been so helpful at this level. And I will definitely share some of this information back with my work as well. And
Scott, could I just
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead,
ahead.
please.
I was just going to say one thing. I just wanted to go back to the political discussion, and I put in the chat there's a Yale program on climate change communications. And if people aren't familiar with it, they have a lot of really good, very up-to-date research. And in their latest survey, they found that this is polling people across the country. The majority of people are worried, concerned, or cautious about climate change. So, and that's across political affiliation. And so, I think that one of the challenges that, Michael had addressed, that there's political forces, but I sort of feel like they're the mice that are trying to roar like a lion, and that we know that the majority of people in the country have now experienced some type of extreme weather event because of the climate crisis. And that it's very hard for anyone to say they have not experienced climate change, and that people are concerned. And even if they're not using the words climate change, but they're talking about flooding, or they're talking about a river drying up or a lake drying up, and maybe they're not saying mental health, but they're saying, I'm upset, I'm sad, I'm scared, whatever it might be, that this is part of our experience and it's part of our dialogue now. And so I think there's also just an opportunity to meet people where they're at. And even despite all of the, challenges in so many places, that, just checking in with people and having conversations about the extreme weather that is due to climate change. But if you can't use that language, and being able to connect with people on that, and also just realizing that I really think that, what this data shows from Yale is that most people, the majority of people, doesn't mean by political affiliation, are concerned, worried, or, about the climate crisis.
Well, listen.
Yeah, I think to Sarah's point, you should really look at the map, and you can see by state how the questions they ask. And one of them is about the teaching of climate change in school. I don't know where Florida ranks on there. I know that in New York, it's 85%, and we've introduced a climate education bill, and we're facing so much resistance, not necessarily on the political aspect of this. It's more logistical, top-down stuff is the resistance, but 85%. And across the nation, I think it's almost like 60 to 70% of states, people across the states agree that students should be learning about the causes and solutions, is how they ask it, of global warming. I think when it comes to the political aspect, what I was saying before about the packaging of different issues, I think climate change needs to stand alone, because there's a wonderful book called Strangers in Their Own Land, and it's about Louisiana, and specifically in Cancer Alley. And the researcher's question is, why do these people vote against their interests. These are people who live in a place called Cancer Alley and have high instances of cancer because they live at the sorry, I'm forgetting the term, but at the very bottom of the Mississippi River, where all the pollution is collected and there's dumping that went on there. It's a huge environmental issue. Oh, sorry, what did you say, Stephanie?
I just said the Delta.
The Delta, thank you so much. Yes, mentoring a seventh grade student in science probably comes really in handy with those terms. Yeah, anyway, they live at the Delta of the river. And the question is, why do they keep voting against their own interests, even if they're environmental activists? And it's because they see climate change as part of a package, as part of an ideology that they don't support. And I think that discussing climate emotions is a way to start to go beyond this and to start to realize, like, okay, how do I feel about this? Feeling a certain way about something should transcend party lines. And that these are conversations, like I said, that can be had intergenerationally, across party lines, etc. Especially when it comes to young people who are seeing this information, regardless of what it is that their parents believe or the politics of their school district.
I think that's really important what you and Sarah just said, that I think a lot of students can relate to, Sarah said you talk about fire and you talk about flooding and that kind of thing. And I think you're saying the same thing. So I do think students can often relate to something they see just around them, like even the development, trees being cut down, increased rates of cancer. I mean, things that they see and are more tangible to them than global warming or climate change, or the emotions that they're feeling. To me, that's the real take-home message of this meeting. That's been really helpful to me, is to try to connect with people more on that level than global warming seems to get people's political ire up. And even climate change does too. So I think that's a really good take home. Everything you're all saying is, to me, is a very good take home message from this meeting.
Thanks, Stephanie. I wonder, Jamie's question makes me think just about, she obviously is creating a space in her own home for talking with her child about this issue. And then it's a little frustrating, obviously, to not be able to talk about it in the school. What is it, any of you have any advice for how you might encourage the school to talk about this?
I just wanted to say that, first of all, we have great resources that we created with Alicia and her colleagues. And also we have resources for parents on our website of how to have conversations with elementary school kids and middle school and high school kids. And, with all of these, I think they're obviously really valuable resources. None of this existed even 9 months ago, a year ago. And so it's very exciting to be able to finally have these resources available. But I also see them as they're kind of like a seed that we've planted, and we need a forest. We know that there's so much more that needs to be done. But we have all of these things, and we're trying to work as quickly as possible to create more. So I can put those into the chat. And I think that another thing is that, in terms of having these conversations in the school, this is where some of our parents' work comes in, and that I really invite parents to reach out to us, because we're trying to work on connecting those bridges between parents and educators as well, so that these conversations aren't just siloed in a school or in a home, and that there can be a more integrated approach. But also, recognizing that parents and teachers are really struggling with their own climate emotions. And so it's kind of a double burden, that they are struggling themselves. And then we're also asking them to support young people. And we kind of use the analogy of like when you're on an airplane with a young child, that you put on your oxygen mask before you put it on the child. And that adults, caregivers, parents, educators, others in schools, they need their own self-care practices so that they can then, in a healthy and appropriate way, be able to support students.
Excellent. So, just to touch on your point, when you reach out to I know you have actually introduced me to the head of the PTA down in Miami-Dade, and so you're reaching out purposefully to those kinds of organizations, PTAs and other kinds of things to spread the message that way. That's
Yeah.
part of it. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely welcome any parent groups that would be interested in using our resources, and we're doing focus groups right now with parents. So once those are done, we're going to have more resources and updated resources.
Well, thank you. We're kind of winding up. It's 8 o'clock right now. So I'm going to ask us to close down in a minute, but I wanted to, Mark, you haven't had any, you kind of joined us a little bit late, but I didn't know if you had a quick
I did.
question
I'm one of
for
the
us.
founders of CASTLE, Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, which Alicia talked about the standards issues, and I'm very interested in this issue. Good friends with Tom Roderick, Alyssa mentioned, who has just written a fantastic book, Teach for Climate Justice. And I think to move this to the center, we need the kind of legislation that Alyssa's talking about at the state standards level, but we also need research. So these materials are a fantastic start. But we need trials that show that students that receive this kind of teaching, and it requires teachers to be trained. Otherwise, it's going to fail. To show that students that go through these kinds of curricula actually are doing better around climate change, both in terms of action and their own emotions. And so we're at the very beginning of this. You might be also interested in the MGIEP UNESCO curriculum from New Delhi on SEL and emotions and climate change. There's things bubbling up all over the world. I've just been catching up on this the last couple of months myself. The Climate Action Network is a great idea. Thank you for starting it, Susan and others. And I'm here just to listen, to learn.
Well, fantastic.
Mark, I'll just quickly add, oh, sorry, go on.
Sure, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I can't share anything right now, but there's work that we're doing that answers many of your questions. So stay tuned for more about that. And that also, we do have research that we've done that's informing all of our work. And I think also one of the challenges is that we need to be doing this as quickly as possible. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is kind of building the plane and flying it at the same time. Because what happens in 1 to 2 years is so consequential to so many young people.
Oh, great. I think that's more research needed. We know that. So thank you, Mark, for that. And that's a great way for us, I think, to wrap up here. I just want to thank our presenters. This has been a fantastic session. I wish we had more people in person seeing this, but I think we want to do a great job of promoting this, both with respect to FCEN, our network here, but also I know, Sarah, you're going to be getting that to Volo at some point and promoting it there as well. So maybe they want to do something before the conference that they have a little bit later in the year. So we might talk to them a little bit about that, but we want to thank everybody. We'll get the word out, to you, I guess, about, if I can just quickly, let me see if I can show this. I can show you a screen for next month. You can see that when we're going to do from the Thompson Earth and Systems Institute down at Gainesville, University of Florida, is going to talk a little bit about some of the work that they do with students on science, getting scientists in the classroom, and some of their other action projects. So I just wanted to show you that, and we'll send you some information about that. And again, thank you for our wonderful presentation today. And I hope I hope we'll carry on some of that work in that area. We really want to make sure our Florida teachers can see this too. So we'll figure out some good ways to get this to them. So thank you again, everybody, and we'll wish you a good night.
Thank you so much for having us.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.